Welcome back, weary traveler, to the soothing shadows of the 1001 Nights. Tonight, as the stars settle and the world outside grows quiet, we invite you to close your eyes and let the sound of an ancient story guide you into a deep and restful sleep. Forget the worries of the day and prepare to drift away on the gentle currents of an Eastern tale, a story of poverty, secret magic, and immense, unexpected destiny. This is the beginning of the magical legend of Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp. In a great, bustling city of China, far from the capital where the Sultan ruled, there lived a humble tailor named Mustafa. Mustafa was a good and quiet man, but he was very poor. His wife and his only son, Aladdin, shared his meager home. Aladdin was a boy of simple spirit and much idleness. As he grew up, he showed no interest in learning his father's gentle trade of tailoring. He preferred to spend his days playing in the streets and markets with the city's other boys, wasting his time in games and mischief. This idleness brought great sorrow to his father, who constantly worried about the future of his lazy son. Sadly, the strain of these worries and the hard work eventually took their toll on the old tailor. One day, Mustafa the tailor fell gravely ill. Despite the best efforts of his wife and son, he passed away quietly, leaving his family destitute. Aladdin's mother, though heartbroken, was a strong woman. She sold off the tailor's simple tools and meager household goods to survive, and she supported herself and her idle son by spinning cotton. Aladdin continued his idle life, ignoring his mother's pleas to find honest work. They lived like this for several years, their poverty deepening with each passing season, until Aladdin reached the age of 15. He was now a handsome young man, but still without a trade or a purpose. One afternoon, as Aladdin was playing his usual games in a public square, a wealthy, dark-skinned stranger approached him. This man was wearing rich, impressive robes and a magnificent turban, and he carried the confident air of an important traveling merchant. The stranger stood watching Aladdin for a long time. Finally, he approached the young man and asked gently, "Tell me, young fellow, are you not the son of Mustafa the tailor?" Aladdin replied, "Sir, I am indeed the son of Mustafa, but my poor father has been dead for a very long time." When the stranger heard this, he threw his arms around Aladdin and embraced him tightly. He wept bitterly, mourning the death of his supposed brother. "Alas, my son, I am your long-lost uncle," the stranger exclaimed. "I traveled to this distant land many years ago to seek my fortune, and I've only just returned to find this grievous news. I could not leave the city without seeking out my brother's son. In truth, this man was not Aladdin's uncle at all. He was a powerful and wicked African magician who had spent many years searching the world for a specific, secret treasure that, according to his ancient calculations, could only be retrieved by a simple, naive boy named Aladdin, the son of a tailor named Mustafa. The magician had no power to take the treasure himself. He needed Aladdin's innocent hand. The magician drew out a purse of gold and immediately gave it to Aladdin, instructing him to take it to his mother. "Take this money to your mother, my dear nephew, and tell her that your wealthy uncle wishes to eat supper with you tonight, so we may mourn my brother together." Aladdin rushed home and excitedly told his mother the fantastic story of his newfound rich uncle. His mother, astonished by the sudden appearance of a long-lost brother-in-law, quickly purchased fine provisions and prepared a grand supper for the three of them. That evening, the magician arrived, and the supper was filled with false affection. He spoke of the late Mustafa with great love and shed tears for his dead brother. He convinced Aladdin's mother that he was a wealthy, honest man who truly wished to help them. During the meal, the magician turned to Aladdin. "My nephew," he said kindly, "I see that you are a handsome, strong young man, but you have no trade. Tomorrow, I will take you to the finest markets in the city. I will dress you in the best clothes, and I will set you up in a shop with the finest silks, so that you may become a respected merchant and live a life of ease. I will be your protector and your benefactor." Aladdin was overjoyed and promised to be diligent. His mother, seeing her son finally inspired and promised a decent future, was deeply grateful to the benevolent brother-in-law. They went to bed that night feeling a hope they had not felt since the tailor's death, completely unaware of the deadly plot that lay hidden beneath the magician's kindness. We left the young Aladdin full of false hope, trusting the wicked African magician who claimed to be his long-lost uncle. The magician was ready to put his deadly secret plan into action. The next morning, the magician rose early and dressed Aladdin in magnificent, expensive robes, just as he had promised. He took the boy to the finest parts of the city, introducing him to merchants and showing him the grand marketplaces. He bought Aladdin wonderful foods and spoke kindly to him, gaining the boy's full trust and affection. At sunset, the magician led Aladdin out of the busy city gates. The boy, who had never ventured far from the city walls before, felt a nervous excitement. They began a long, slow walk away from the sounds and lights of the city and deep into the silent, surrounding countryside. The walk was long and arduous. The road became rough, turning into a rocky, barren path. The magician led Aladdin over dusty hills and through quiet, deserted valleys. Though tired and anxious, dared not complain, as he did not want to displease his rich and kind uncle. Finally, after hours of walking under the dim light of the setting sun, they reached a very remote and desolate place, a small valley surrounded by jagged, uninviting rocks. There was no life here, only silence and the cold stone of the earth. The magician abruptly stopped and looked around carefully, as if verifying the position of the stars and the placement of the mountains. He then dropped the heavy pack he was carrying. "My nephew," the magician said, his voice now lower and more serious, "we have arrived at the spot. We are far from the prying eyes of men. This is where I will reveal the great secret wealth that I intend to share with you, a wealth that will make you greater than any sultan." Aladdin's heart began to beat fast with excitement and a touch of fear. He watched as the magician gathered small, dry twigs and leaves and built a little fire in a cleared space on the ground. The magician then took out a small brass box from his robes. He opened it and pulled out a special, dark, powdered incense, scattering it slowly onto the small flames. A thick, strangely scented smoke immediately rose into the air, carrying a heavy, ancient odor that made Aladdin's head spin slightly. As the smoke rose, the magician began to chant in a strange, low voice. He spoke words in a language Aladdin had never heard before, words that sounded like the dry whisper of old desert winds. The chant was long, monotonous, and very slow, the type of sound that puts a restless mind to sleep. As the magician's chant reached a deep, final note, the ground began to shake slightly beneath their feet. A low, grinding noise echoed through the desolate valley. Aladdin cried out in surprise and fear. Suddenly, a large, flat stone slab appeared to push itself up from the earth, as if lifted by an unseen hand. The stone slid slowly to one side, revealing a deep, dark hole in the ground, the opening to a long staircase leading down into the complete darkness of the earth. Aladdin stared into the dark hole, his excitement now mixed with real terror. The magician, his face solemn and still, turned to the boy. "Beneath these steps lies a treasure of immense value," the magician explained, his voice now calm again. "I need you, and only you, to descend and bring forth a specific item. Listen to my instructions very carefully, for your life depends on perfect obedience." The magician explained that Aladdin must ascend the stone steps, which led to 3 large subterranean chambers filled with gold, jewels, and rich silks. He was free to take any treasure he wished from the outer chambers, but he must not touch anything with his bare hands. Everything must be handled only through his clothing. The most important thing, however, the magician emphasized, pointing into the blackness, is the old lamp. You will find it hanging on a hook in the final chamber. You must bring me only that lamp, and then I will help you out. Aladdin, mesmerized by the dark, forbidden entrance and the promise of unimaginable wealth, nodded slowly. He did not yet know that the treacherous path down into the earth was about to become the most important and frightening journey of his young life. We continue the quiet, tense journey of Aladdin and the wicked African magician. We left them standing before the terrible, dark hole in the earth, the secret entrance to the deepest cavern of forbidden treasure. The magician gave Aladdin a final, stern warning. He took a heavy, intricate ring from his own finger and forced it onto the young man's finger. "This ring is merely a protection against the dark spirits of the cavern," the magician said, his voice cold. "Do not lose it, and do not forget your instructions. You must descend these steps alone. When you reach the bottom, you will enter 3 great halls. The first 2 halls are filled with gold and silver. The 3rd hall is the largest, filled with gems and jewels that no king on earth possesses." Aladdin listened, his eyes wide with a mixture of greed and fear. "Remember this well," the magician continued, his voice hardening. "You must not touch anything with your bare skin. If you touch the walls or the treasures, you will immediately die. Wrap the riches in the folds of your robes if you wish to carry them out. But your only true mission is to bring me the old lamp from the final hall." The magician then pointed to the dark stairs. Trusting his uncle and blinded by the vision of immense wealth, bravely began his slow descent into the cold, silent darkness of the earth. The stone steps were long and winding. The darkness was absolute, heavy, and suffocating, wrapping around the boy like a thick blanket. Aladdin walked slowly, placing his feet carefully on each cold, ancient step. After what seemed like an hour, he reached the bottom of the staircase and found himself in a long corridor. The corridor was no longer dark. A mysterious, glowing light, soft and greenish blue, illuminated the space. He entered the first hall. It was a massive chamber, and the source of the soft light became apparent. The hall was filled with piles of ancient gold coins and large, shining silver bars. The treasures were simply stacked on the floor and against the walls, lying there for centuries, waiting. Aladdin was overwhelmed by the sight, but he remembered the magician's strict warning not to touch anything with his skin. He resisted the urge to dive into the gold. He passed slowly into the second hall. This hall was even more magnificent. It was filled not just with coins, but with shelves holding ancient, jewel-encrusted vases and intricate statues made of solid gold. The air in this hall was still and heavy with the scent of old dust and forgotten wealth. Aladdin walked through, his breathing steadying as he grew accustomed to the incredible silence of the deep earth. Finally, he reached the third hall. This chamber surpassed all belief. Here, the wealth was not gold, but precious jewels and gems. The light was dazzling, radiating from mountains of rubies, emeralds, sapphires, and diamonds piled up higher than a man. The jewels were strung on ropes or scattered loose on the floor, glittering in the eerie blue light like drops of water. In the center of this incredible wealth, hanging simply from a hook on the far wall, was a small, dusty, ordinary brass lamp. It looked completely worthless compared to the riches surrounding it. Aladdin, still obedient, walked carefully towards the lamp. He paused only long enough to use the sleeves of his new robe to sweep up handfuls of the most colorful and large gemstones, stuffing them into the folds of his clothing. He filled his pockets until his clothes bulged and the silk felt heavy on his skin. He then reached the hook and with a quick pull, took down the old, dusty brass lamp. It felt heavy and strangely cold in his hand. With the lamp secured, Aladdin turned and began his ascent, eager now to leave the overwhelming silence and coldness of the treasure cave and rejoin his uncle in the warm light of the world above. He knew his life was about to change forever. We return now to the deep, terrifying silence of the hidden cavern, where Aladdin had successfully retrieved the dusty old lamp and was beginning his slow, heavy journey back towards the light. His clothes were bulging and heavy with the immense weight of the most beautiful jewels on earth. The ascent up the long, winding stone staircase was far more difficult than the descent. Aladdin was tired, his legs ached, and his heart pounded with the dual effort of the climb and the desire to escape the cold, suffocating silence of the earth. Finally, after a long, painful effort, he reached the top of the steps. He could see the opening above, and the face of the African magician, illuminated by the last weak rays of the setting sun. "Uncle, Uncle," Aladdin cried out, his voice hoarse with relief. "I have the lamp. I am here, but I need your hand to help pull me from this hole. The jewels are heavy." The magician, however, did not offer his hand. His eyes, fixed with greedy intensity, only looked at the dusty brass object in Aladdin's hand. "Never mind the jewels, fool," the magician snapped, his voice suddenly sharp and impatient, losing all trace of kindness. "Before you take one more step, give me the lamp. Hand it to me now." Aladdin was surprised and offended by the magician's harsh change in tone. He also realized that if he handed over the lamp now, with his hands full of jewels and his body still halfway trapped in the hole, the magician might simply abandon him. "I cannot, good uncle," Aladdin pleaded. "The hole is deep, and my hands are full of the gems. Pull me out first, and then I will give you the lamp immediately, as I promised." The magician knew that once Aladdin was out of the hole and on solid ground, the boy might run away with the treasure and the highly desired lamp. His true aim was only the lamp, and he had no patience for the boy's hesitation. The magician's rage was terrible and immediate. The mask of the kind uncle finally shattered, revealing the cruel, wicked man beneath. "You stubborn, insolent boy," the magician screamed, his face contorted with fury. "You dare to disobey me after all I have done for you? Hand it over or perish." When Aladdin still refused to surrender the lamp before being pulled to safety, the magician abandoned all pretense. He knew the boy was useless to him now. With a quick, sharp motion, he threw a small amount of incense onto the dying fire and spoke two quick, harsh words of power. With a deep, grinding roar, the massive stone slab that covered the opening slid back over the hole with terrifying speed and finality. Aladdin screamed in terror as the last sliver of daylight vanished. He was plunged into absolute, crushing darkness, sealed entirely within the stone walls of the cavern, deep beneath the earth. The wicked African magician laughed a cruel, short laugh of triumph and immediately rode away, abandoning Aladdin to a slow, terrible death. Trapped in the deepest silence, Aladdin spent what felt like 2 long, dark days in hopeless despair. He cried, he shouted, but the ancient earth was deaf. He had food, the dates the magician gave him, but no water, and his terror was absolute. He thought only of his poor mother, whom he would never see again. Finally, driven by the cold and heavy darkness, and remembering his mother's teachings, he clasped his hands together in prayer. As he rubbed his cold hands together, the smooth ring that the magician had forced onto his finger accidentally rubbed against a rock. A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the cavern, and a huge, terrifying figure appeared instantly before him, rising from the cold stone floor in a cloud of thick smoke. The figure was tall and monstrous, glowing with an internal, eerie blue light. The creature spoke in a voice that rumbled like thunder, shaking the very earth around Aladdin. I am the genie of the ring. I am the servant of the one who wears me, and I await your command. Speak, master. What is your desire? Aladdin, though trembling with terror at the genie's sudden appearance, realized that this was a sign of salvation. He found his voice and without thinking cried out, "O mighty servant, whoever you are, I only wish to be taken out of this terrible place. Take me home to my mother." Now Aladdin, still trembling from the sudden appearance of the mighty genie of the ring, stood paralyzed for a moment. He repeated his plea in a whisper, "Take me home. Take me to my mother." The genie of the ring, a huge and terrible spirit, vanished instantly in a clap of thunder. In the very next moment, Aladdin found himself standing back outside the city walls, on the spot near his home where he used to play. The dark, desolate valley and the closed cavern were hundreds of miles away, completely unseen. The magic was instantaneous. He was safe, and though overwhelmed, remembered the immense jewels still hidden in the folds of his robe. He walked slowly back to his small, humble house, arriving in the dead of night. His poor mother, who had been weeping inconsolably since his disappearance, was overjoyed and rushed to embrace him. She had given up all hope, believing the rich uncle had either killed her son or abandoned him to death. Aladdin told her the entire horrifying story, the magician's treachery, the dark hole, the piles of forbidden jewels, his imprisonment, and finally, the mysterious, terrifying genie of the ring that had saved him. His mother, a practical woman, was terrified by the tale of the genie and the sorcery. She insisted that Aladdin must immediately discard the treacherous ring. Aladdin, however, refused. He reminded her that the ring, though given by the wicked magician, had been their salvation. He kept it safely on his finger. The next morning, Aladdin emptied his pockets and poured the stones onto the floor. The sight of the jewels, rubies, sapphires, emeralds, and diamonds was blinding. They were enormous and glowed with a magical light, far surpassing any gems known in their city. His mother had never seen anything so valuable. She realized their poverty was instantly over, but she had no idea how to sell such treasures without raising suspicion. Aladdin, exhausted from his ordeal, and having had nothing to eat since the journey 2 days before, felt faint. He told his mother he needed food immediately. His mother replied sadly, "Alas, my son, we have nothing left to eat. You know, I sold the last thread from my spindle yesterday. We have no money left to buy bread." "Mother," said Aladdin, suddenly remembering the small brass item he had risked his life for, "what about the old lamp? That dusty thing is of no use to us, but perhaps we can sell it for a few coins to buy food." His mother agreed that the lamp might fetch a small price. But the lamp was filthy and covered in black grease and dirt from the cavern. "Before we take it to the market," she said, "I must first clean it." She took the small brass lamp and reached for a cloth and a little water. She began to rub the surface of the lamp vigorously, trying to scrub away the ancient dirt. The moment she did so, the room was instantly filled with a thick, choking cloud of black smoke, and a creature appeared that was far more enormous and terrifying than the genie of the ring. This genie was immense, a giant spirit whose head seemed to touch the rafters of their humble house. It had a fierce, powerful appearance, with strong muscles and glowing eyes. The sight of it terrified Aladdin's poor mother so much that she immediately fainted, collapsing onto the floor with a soft cry. Aladdin, who was standing nearby, only had time to rub the magician's ring reflexively in fear. This brought forth the smaller genie of the ring, who stood ready for command. The genie from the lamp spoke in a colossal voice, louder and deeper than any thunder. "I am the genie of the lamp. I am the servant of the one who possesses the lamp. Master, I am ready to serve you and obey your every command. Speak, what is your will?" Aladdin, though terrified, realized immediately that this lamp was the ultimate source of power that the wicked magician had risked everything to obtain. He knew he was the true master now. Ignoring the immense power standing before him and the sound of his mother's body lying on the floor, Aladdin focused only on his hunger. He knew the power of the genie of the lamp was far greater than the genie of the ring. "First, mighty genie," Aladdin commanded, speaking with new confidence, "bring me a magnificent feast. Bring us the finest food and wine the city has ever tasted." Aladdin stood firm, ignoring the massive genie of the lamp and the unconscious form of his mother on the floor. He focused only on the command he had given. "Bring us a magnificent feast." The genie of the lamp vanished instantly, without making a sound or leaving any smoke. The transformation was so fast that Aladdin did not even have time to blink. Where the genie had stood, there was now a beautiful table set with the most spectacular feast imaginable. The table was covered with a clean, fine cloth and laden with 20 silver dishes, all piled high with delicate prepared foods, meats, exotic fruits, sweet pastries, and the finest wines. The dishes themselves were made not of silver, but of solid gold, inlaid with shimmering jewels. The cups, the serving spoons, and even the water pitcher were all made of the most precious metals. Aladdin quickly put aside the shock of the magical appearance and rushed to revive his mother. He brought cool water and gently sprinkled it on her face. When she finally awoke, she saw the enormous, impossible feast before them. She was immediately horrified, thinking it was the work of demons or dark magic. "My son," she whispered, her voice trembling, "send this evil thing away. It is the work of dark spirits, and we must not touch it." Aladdin calmly showed her the lamp and explained that the great spirit was now gone. "Mother, this is not evil magic, but a gift from God." The genie obeyed my command. "We were starving. We must eat now, and then we will discuss how to manage this new power." After much pleading, Aladdin convinced his mother that the food was real and harmless. They sat down and ate the most marvelous meal of their entire lives. The food was rich, the flavors were complex, and the experience was overwhelming. For 2 days, they lived only on the remnants of the genie's feast. When the food was finally gone, Aladdin looked at the empty golden dishes. "Mother," he said, "we cannot use the lamp again for a small thing like buying bread. It would be foolish and dangerous to summon such a powerful spirit for simple hunger. But these dishes are made of gold. They are our wealth now." His mother agreed, but she was afraid. "Who in this city would buy a dish of solid gold, my son? They will immediately suspect us of theft." Aladdin devised a quiet plan. He took one of the large, jeweled golden dishes, wrapped it carefully in an old cloth, and slipped out to the market. He avoided the main streets and instead went to a remote corner where a respectable old Jewish jeweler, goldsmith, had his shop. Aladdin entered the quiet shop and showed the jeweler the golden dish. The jeweler was astonished by the quality and the purity of the gold. He tried to trick the young, naive boy, offering a very small sum of money. But Aladdin insisted that the jeweler must simply weigh the dish and pay the true value of the gold. The jeweler, seeing the boy was determined, paid him a large sum, enough to live comfortably for several months. And so, Aladdin and his mother lived for some time in quiet prosperity. Every few weeks, Aladdin would secretly take one more golden dish to the old jeweler, always receiving a great sum of money, ensuring they never wanted for food or comfort again. Aladdin lived a life of ease, spending his days visiting the baths and wearing clean, fine clothes. He was no longer the idle, poor boy of the streets. One day, while exploring a wealthy area of the city, Aladdin heard the sound of trumpets and realized there was an event happening at the Sultan's palace. He learned that Princess Badr al-Budur, the Light of Lights, the Sultan's beautiful daughter, was about to pass through the city streets. The Sultan had ordered that no citizen should look upon the princess's face. Every shop was ordered to close, and every person commanded to turn their backs as she passed. But Aladdin, driven by his new curiosity and daring spirit, hid himself in a recess of the public bathhouse, behind a narrow wooden screen. As the princess passed by, he secretly peered through a crack in the screen and saw her face for the first time. The princess was traveling to the public bath, so she had removed her veil. Her beauty was so breathtaking, so magnificent and perfect. that Aladdin was instantly, completely, and hopelessly in love. Her image burned itself into his mind. He forgot everything: the gold, the lamp, and the genie. He knew with absolute certainty that he could not live another day without her. The image of Princess Badr al-Budur, Light of Lights, was now permanently etched into Aladdin's heart. He returned home from the bathhouse in a state of feverish excitement, forgetting all sleep and all hunger. He told his mother of his decision immediately. "Mother," Aladdin declared, his voice firm, "I have seen the face of the Sultan's daughter. Her beauty is beyond all comparison. I have no choice. I must ask for her hand in marriage." His mother was absolutely stunned. She thought her son had gone completely mad. She reminded him of their humble past and the vast gulf that separated the son of a tailor from the daughter of a powerful sultan. "My dear son," she pleaded, "you forget who we are. Even with our current wealth, we are mere commoners. How can you possibly approach the Sultan with such an audacious request? This is madness. We will be punished." Aladdin listened patiently to his mother's frantic arguments, but his heart was resolute. He knew that now, armed with the power of the lamp, anything was possible. He instructed his mother to prepare herself to go to the palace to speak with the Sultan. His mother strongly refused, arguing that no man approaches a king without a magnificent gift, and they had no such gift worthy of the royal house. The young man smiled. He calmly reminded his mother of the true, untold wealth they possessed. He brought forth the remaining jewels and gems that he had collected in the deep cavern. He laid them out, shining like fire, on the simple table. The mother was overcome. Even after living in prosperity for months, she had forgotten the shocking brilliance of the cave gems. Aladdin then instructed his mother to take the largest and most perfect jewels, 20 of the most enormous rubies, diamonds, and emeralds, and wrap them in 5 pieces of fine cloth. "This gift," he explained, "will be worthy of the greatest king on earth." The young man used his own hands to select and prepare the stones carefully. After much persuasion and prayer, his mother finally agreed to attempt the dangerous mission. The next morning, the mother of Aladdin, wrapped in humble clothing and carrying the incredible gift, set off for the Sultan's palace. She was easily allowed into the public hall, where citizens could present their petitions to the Sultan, but she was too timid to speak. The sheer grandeur of the court, with its countless viziers, dignitaries, and guards, terrified her into silence. The mother of Aladdin returned to the hall every day for an entire week. She would stand patiently, waiting for an opportunity to speak, but always returned home without uttering a single word. Finally, on the 8th day, the Sultan noticed the strange woman who stood faithfully and silently in the same spot every morning. Out of curiosity, the Sultan called her forward. Trembling with fear, the mother of Aladdin fell to her knees before the throne. When the Sultan commanded her to speak, she told him everything, that she had come to ask for the hand of his most precious daughter, Princess Badr al-Budur, for her son. She did not mention the lamp or the genie. The Sultan, initially outraged by the audacity of a poor-looking woman making such a request, was about to dismiss her completely, but he then noticed the bundle she held. He commanded her to present her gift. The mother of Aladdin, her hand shaking, slowly unwrapped the 5 cloths. When the 20 gigantic jewels were revealed, the sunlight streaming through the windows seemed to shatter into 1,000 colors. The immense size and fiery brilliance of the gems astonished the Sultan. He had never, in his entire life, seen such perfection. The Sultan knew instantly that no king or emperor possessed a gift of such quality. He was deeply moved by the magnificent offering, but he did not wish to marry his daughter to an unknown commoner. He needed time to consider. He told Aladdin's mother that he accepted the beautiful gift with gratitude. However, he declared that she must return in 3 months' time. Only then would he give her a definitive answer regarding the marriage of her son to Princess Badr al-Budoor. The Sultan's mother, relieved and slightly hopeful, thanked the great ruler and rushed home to tell Aladdin the news. The mother of Aladdin returned home from the palace, overjoyed yet deeply anxious. She told her son that the Sultan had accepted the priceless gift but commanded them to return in 3 months' time for his answer. The young man was thrilled. He knew the sheer magnificence of the jewels had shaken the Sultan's resolve. He spent the next 3 months in impatient anticipation, counting every day, using the wealth from the golden dishes to live a life of peaceful, hopeful luxury. He did not use the lamp, wanting to save its immense power for the day the Sultan gave his consent. Finally, the long 3 months passed. The mother of Aladdin prepared to return to the palace. However, during this long period, the Sultan had been strongly influenced by his powerful and scheming Grand Vizier. The Vizier was a man of great cunning and ambition. He convinced the Sultan that his own son was a far more suitable husband for the royal princess than some unknown commoner. He constantly reminded the Sultan that the 3-month period was too long. Yielding to the Vizier's constant persuasion, and despite the beauty of Aladdin's gift, the Sultan decided to break his promise. He announced that Princess Badr al-Budoor would marry the Vizier's son. The wedding ceremonies began immediately with great splendor and expense. The entire city celebrated the royal marriage for several days, unaware of the broken promise. The day the 3 months ended, the mother of Aladdin arrived at the palace, dressed in her best robes. As she entered the public hall, she was astonished to see signs of immense celebration, but the atmosphere felt heavy and strange. She stood patiently in her usual spot, waiting for the Sultan. When he finally addressed the waiting crowd, he spoke of his new son-in-law, the son of the Vizier. The mother of Aladdin was crushed. She realized immediately that the Sultan had betrayed her son. She returned home, heart filled with sorrow and righteous anger. She found Aladdin waiting eagerly. "My son," she cried, "all is lost. The Sultan is a liar. Your 3 months are up, but he has broken his royal word. Princess Badr al-Budoor is already married to the Vizier's son. The wedding was today, and tonight they will share their first night together." Aladdin felt a searing rage and heartbreak. The shock of the betrayal turned his patience into fierce resolve. He would not stand by and allow the marriage to be completed. He was determined to use the full, terrifying power of the lamp to reclaim what the Sultan had denied him. He went to his private room, took out the dusty old lamp, and rubbed its side with firm, slow strokes. The immense genie of the lamp appeared instantly in a cloud of thick, dark smoke. Its power filled the room, making the air hum with ancient magic. "I am here, master. Command me," the colossal genie rumbled. Aladdin stood tall, his voice steady despite his fury. "Genie," he commanded, "tonight the vizier's son will go to the bedchamber of Princess Badr al-Budoor. Before he can touch her, you must take both of them, instantly and without causing them any physical harm, and transport them to this very house. Set them down in separate beds in this room. And you must do this every night until I command otherwise." The genie bowed its mighty head in absolute obedience. "Your command is my will, master of the lamp. It shall be done." Later that evening, in the magnificent bedchamber of the princess, the vizier's son entered to greet his beautiful royal bride. As the young man approached her, the room suddenly went dark. In a terrifying clap of thunder, the vizier's son found himself instantly transported, along with Princess Badr al-Budoor, to the cold, unfamiliar bedroom of Aladdin's humble house. The genie placed the startled vizier's son in one bed and placed the princess in another, separating them instantly. The genie stood guard between the two beds, silent and massive, ensuring the vizier's son could not move or even speak a word. The princess lay frozen in fear. The genie ensured that the marriage would not be truly recognized. The vizier's son lay frozen in a state of utter terror. He found himself in a cold, unfamiliar room, separated from his royal bride, Princess Badr al-Budoor, by the enormous, silent, and powerful genie of the lamp. He dared not move, speak, or even turn his head, fearing the immense spirit standing guard over them. The princess, too, lay motionless, her royal wedding night turned into a nightmare of fear and bewilderment. The long, terrifying hours of the night dragged on slowly, filled only with the sound of their own trembling hearts. Just before the dawn broke, the great genie of the lamp instantly reappeared. With a silent clap of thunder, Aladdin's command was completed, and the couple was transported back to the princess's magnificent chamber in the sultan's palace. The vizier's son sprang from the bed and immediately ran out of the room, ashamed and completely broken by the inexplicable terror. He did not speak to the princess or wait for the sultan. He rushed straight to his own father's house, exhausted and frantic. When the sultan came to greet his daughter and son-in-law the next morning, he was shocked to find his daughter weeping and the vizier's son completely missing. The sultan, confused, asked his beloved daughter what had happened during her wedding night. Princess Badr al-Budoor dried her tears and recounted the impossible events. She described the sudden darkness, the magical transportation to an unknown house, the cold room, and the immense, terrifying giant who stood silently between the two beds all night long. The princess swore that the marriage had not been recognized. The sultan dismissed the story as a terrible wedding night nightmare. He was an honest man, but he could not believe in such sorcery. He commanded the vizier's son to return to his wife the following night, convinced that the terror would not repeat itself. The vizier's son was forced to obey his father and the sultan. He returned to the palace for the second wedding night, his fear even greater than before. The same terrible event repeated itself exactly. As the young man approached the princess, the room went dark. He and the princess were instantly transported to Aladdin's humble home. The enormous genie of the lamp stood guard between the beds until the morning, silent and utterly terrifying. The poor vizier's son returned home at dawn on the second day, completely distraught. He was pale, trembling, and deeply ashamed. He rushed immediately to the Sultan, bowing low. "My lord, I beg of you," the young man cried, his voice breaking. "I cannot continue with this marriage. My wife, the princess, is bewitched. The terrifying ordeal of the silent giant has broken my spirit. I beg you to declare this marriage void. I cannot spend one more night in her chamber." The Sultan, seeing the sincere terror in the eyes of the vizier's son, was finally convinced that some strange, powerful magic was at work. He consulted with the Grand Vizier, who was equally shocked and unable to explain the sorcery. Out of fear for his daughter's life and sanity, the Sultan immediately agreed to dissolve the marriage. He declared the wedding null and void, and the vizier's son fled the palace, relieved to be free from the terrifying power. The news spread throughout the city that the marriage had been mysteriously and magically broken, and that Princess Badr al-Budur was once again available to marry. Aladdin, upon hearing the news, knew this was his moment. He had waited patiently, endured the Sultan's deception, and now his plan had worked perfectly. He took the great jewels that his mother had brought home and commanded her to return immediately to the palace to remind the Sultan of his original promise. The Sultan had finally dissolved the magically haunted marriage, and Princess Badr al-Budur was once again free. Aladdin, knowing the time was perfect, instructed his mother to return to the palace immediately to press their claim. The mother of Aladdin, now far less timid, went back to the palace and stood before the Sultan. She reminded him respectfully of his previous promise and presented her son's renewed request for the hand of the princess. The Sultan, now very cautious about making promises, was immediately confused. The gift Aladdin had presented was still the most magnificent he had ever seen, yet the proposer was the son of a humble tailor. The Grand Vizier, seeing his own son humiliated and his plan ruined, stepped forward. He whispered advice into the Sultan's ear. "My lord," the Vizier murmured, "this young man is unknown. If he truly possesses wealth that surpasses kings, let him prove it. Set a condition upon him so impossible that no commoner could ever meet it." The Sultan agreed to the Vizier's counsel. He turned to Aladdin's mother, a faint smile on his lips. "Go back to your son," the Sultan commanded, "and tell him that the Sultan accepts his request under one condition. He must send me a dowry that proves his worthiness to marry my daughter. This gift must be incomparable to anything seen before." The Sultan then set the impossible condition. "Your son must send to the palace 40 immense trays of solid gold, each one filled to the brim with jewels more dazzling than the first offering he gave me. These 40 trays must be carried by 40 beautiful slave girls, and all of them must be dressed in the finest, rarest silks and escorted by 40 black slaves, also dressed in splendid uniforms. If your son meets this condition, the princess is his." The mother of Aladdin returned home, disheartened. She told Aladdin the impossible condition. She was certain that even with their remaining jewels, her son could never fulfill such a grand and ridiculous requirement. The young man listened carefully, and a calm, confident smile spread across his face. He kissed his mother's hand. "Mother," he said gently, "do not despair. The Sultan has commanded a task that is difficult only for common men. For me, it is merely a matter of a few moments." He dismissed his mother and went to his private chamber. He took the dusty old lamp from its hiding place and slowly, deliberately rubbed its side. The colossal genie of the lamp instantly appeared, filling the chamber with smoke and roaring power. "Master, your servant is here. Command me," the genie announced. Aladdin gave the genie the complete command, repeating the Sultan's exact impossible list. "Genie, I command you to immediately bring forth 40 trays of pure gold, filled with the rarest jewels. I also command you to bring 40 beautiful slave girls and 40 powerful black slaves. Provide magnificent robes of the finest quality for all of them, and ensure the entire procession is ready to march to the Sultan's palace without delay." The genie of the lamp bowed low, its head nearly touching the floor. "Master, it is easier for me to do this than for you to pronounce the command." In an instant, the genie vanished. The quiet room was immediately filled with the sound of many people breathing and the sight of unimaginable wealth. The air was thick with the scent of perfume and rare fabrics. The astonished mother of Aladdin rushed to the room. Before her stood 40 exquisite slave girls and 40 proud black slaves, all dressed in uniforms of silk and gold. Before them stood the 40 immense gold trays, piled so high with jewels that the light in the house was almost unbearable. The dowry was ready. The young man commanded his procession to set forth immediately for the Sultan's palace. The humble home of Aladdin was now the starting point for a royal, unbelievable procession. The 40 beautiful slave girls, dressed in robes of shimmering silk embroidered with gold, carried the 40 massive golden trays, their jewels glowing with an internal fire that seemed to light the dawn. They were escorted by the 40 strong black slaves, also clad in magnificent attire. Aladdin commanded his mother to lead this majestic procession to the Sultan's palace. The procession moved silently and slowly through the streets, accompanied by the wide-eyed awe of the city's population. People rushed out of their homes, their minds filled with wonder at the sight of such unprecedented splendor. They had never seen so much concentrated wealth move through their city. It was as if the sun itself was being carried on trays of fire. The procession finally arrived at the gates of the palace. The sight of such majesty immediately brought the entire court to a standstill. The guards rushed to inform the Sultan of the incredible, silent army of slaves that had arrived, bearing a gift of legendary wealth. The Sultan, barely able to believe the report, descended from his throne, followed by the bewildered Grand Vizier and the court. He was led into the courtyard, where the majestic procession was standing motionless. The sight of the reality surpassed even the Sultan's imagination. He walked slowly past the 40 golden trays, each filled with diamonds, rubies, and emeralds larger than any known to man. The sheer number of slaves, their beauty, and the flawless quality of their silken robes confirmed that this was a gift from an immensely powerful prince. The Grand Vizier stood beside the Sultan, his face pale with envy and astonishment. He realized that the dowry he had suggested, meant to be an impossible obstacle, had been treated as a simple request by this mysterious young man. The vizier could not utter a single word of protest or disbelief. The mother of Aladdin, standing proudly at the head of the procession, walked forward and bowed low before the astonished sultan. "My lord," she said calmly, "my son Aladdin has fulfilled the condition you commanded. He sends this dowry for the hand of the most beautiful princess Badr al-Budur." The sultan, overwhelmed by the gift and convinced that Aladdin must be a prince of an unknown and infinitely wealthy kingdom, raised his hands in wonder. "Mother of Aladdin," the sultan proclaimed, his voice ringing through the silent courtyard, "go immediately and tell your son that I accept his proposal with joy. No one in the entire world is worthy of my daughter except the man who could send this wondrous gift. Tell him I am ready to give him my daughter's hand, but I wish to see him immediately. Let him come to the palace so that we may discuss the wedding ceremony this very day." The mother of Aladdin bowed again, filled with triumph, and rushed back home to share the magnificent news with her son. Aladdin was waiting impatiently. When his mother told him the Sultan's command, he was thrilled but knew he could not present himself before the mighty ruler in his current clothing. His appearance needed to match the staggering wealth he had just presented. He took out the old lamp and rubbed it for the third time. The genie of the lamp appeared in an instant. "Genie," Aladdin commanded, "I need a royal change. Bring me the most magnificent robe ever worn by a prince, complete with a splendid diamond-hilted sword, a purse filled with gold coins for scattering to the public, and a retinue of 20 noble slaves to attend me. I must ride in glory to the palace to meet the Sultan." The immense genie of the lamp instantly fulfilled Aladdin's command. The young man stood transformed, clad in a magnificent robe woven with gold and gems, his sword hilt glittering with diamonds. He was attended by 20 handsome slaves, all dressed sumptuously, and a noble white horse stood ready for him. Now looking every inch a king, mounted his horse and set off for the palace. He rode slowly through the city, scattering handfuls of gold coins from his purse to the cheering, grateful people. The air was filled with joyous shouts and the clatter of coins on the stone streets. The people were utterly convinced that a powerful foreign prince had arrived to marry their princess. When he arrived at the Sultan's palace, the court officials rushed out to meet him. The Sultan himself, filled with curiosity and goodwill, received Aladdin in the grand hall. The Sultan was profoundly impressed. He saw a handsome, intelligent young man whose bearing and natural grace surpassed all the noblemen of his own court. He embraced Aladdin and commanded him to sit on the royal sofa, treating him not as a commoner, but as a respected equal. "My son," the Sultan said, smiling, "you have fulfilled my condition with such magnificence that I no longer have any doubt of your worthiness. The marriage may take place this very day." Aladdin thanked the Sultan for his generosity, but then he spoke with the firm dignity of a true prince. "My lord Sultan," Aladdin said respectfully, "I must first ask for one final favor, for I must prove my love and devotion to Princess Badr al-Budur before taking her as my wife." It would not be proper for your daughter to reside in a house that belonged to the son of a humble tailor. I must provide her with a residence worthy of her royal birth." He requested that the Sultan grant him a plot of land directly adjacent to the Sultan's own palace in the large open garden. On that spot, Aladdin declared, "I will build a palace for your daughter that is so magnificent, so beautiful, and so rich that it will make all the other palaces in the world seem like mere huts by comparison. Only then will I be worthy to marry the princess." The Sultan was enchanted by this new, grand idea. He saw not a rash young man, but a noble prince filled with love and immense resources. He immediately agreed. He ordered the chief architect to mark out the largest plot of land possible next to the royal palace and granted Aladdin complete ownership of the site. The Sultan only gave him one condition: "You must begin construction immediately, my son. I will allow 3 days before I expect the work to be well underway." Aladdin returned to the empty plot of land. He dismissed his retinue of slaves and, finding himself alone under the cloak of night, took out the old lamp for the 4th time. The massive genie of the lamp appeared. "Genie," Aladdin commanded, pointing to the land, "I require a palace. Build me a palace on this ground that surpasses all palaces on earth. It must be made of the rarest marble, with walls of jasper and agate. The windows must be encrusted with jewels. The treasures inside must match the magnificence of the exterior. The palace must be complete in all details, fully furnished, ready for habitation, and guarded by impenetrable defenses before the first light of dawn." The genie did not even wait for the last word to be spoken. With a clap of thunder that shook the ground, the genie vanished, and the sounds of colossal, invisible construction began to echo across the silent city. By the time the first faint light touched the horizon, a palace of impossible beauty stood where only an empty garden had been hours before. The first light of dawn brought with it an impossible sight. The Sultan, rising from his sleep and looking out his palace window, was accustomed to seeing the quiet, empty garden next door. Instead, his eyes were met with a colossal, shimmering palace of white and green marble, standing complete and fully formed where the garden had been. The shock was so profound that the Sultan thought he was dreaming. He rushed to his window, rubbed his eyes, and looked again. There was no doubt. A palace of such magnificent scale and beauty that it dwarfed his own royal residence now stood beside it. The walls sparkled with agate and jasper, and the immense jeweled windows caught the morning sun like 1,000 brilliant fires. The Sultan immediately sent out his viziers and guards to verify the miracle. They returned speechless, confirming that the palace was real, complete, and fully furnished, having appeared overnight. The Sultan, now convinced that Aladdin was not only a prince but a man favored by the highest powers, commanded a royal procession and rode to the entrance of the new palace. Aladdin, who had rested briefly and now waited for the Sultan, received his father-in-law to be with the respect due to a king, but with the confidence of a man who owned the world. The Sultan was led through the endless halls of the palace. He was utterly overwhelmed by the sheer, quiet luxury. The rooms were filled with priceless furniture. The ceilings were painted with masterpieces, and every detail, from the massive gold gates to the soft silk rugs, spoke of unimaginable wealth. The Sultan embraced Aladdin, tears in his eyes. "My son," the Sultan exclaimed, "no man on earth could perform such a miracle. You are greater than any emperor. I now see that you are truly worthy of Princess Badr al-Budur. The wedding will be held immediately." The news was announced to the city, and the wedding preparations began instantly. The Sultan ordered the grandest celebrations the city had ever known. The marriage of Aladdin and Princess Badr al-Budur took place that very day with immense pomp and joy. The streets were filled with music and dancing, and the happiness of the Sultan was complete. Aladdin led his beautiful wife, Princess Badr al-Budur, to their magnificent new palace. The princess was enchanted. She discovered that her new husband was not only rich and powerful, but also handsome, kind, and devoted to her. Their married life began immediately in a state of utter bliss and spectacular luxury. For the young man, the lamp was now his source of quiet, constant power. He commanded the genie only when needed, usually for vast sums of gold and riches to maintain his princely lifestyle, or for enormous feasts and gifts for the Sultan's court. He never needed to use the jewels from the cave again. They remained a hidden reserve of wealth. Before settling completely into his new life, Aladdin remembered his dear mother, who still lived in their old, humble house. He did not want her to live far from him, but he knew she preferred the quiet simplicity of her old home. He took out the old lamp and summoned the genie one final time for this task. "Genie," Aladdin commanded, "I want you to move my mother's old house, exactly as it is, with every piece of furniture, and place it gently into the gardens directly behind my new palace. I want her to be close, yet retain the comfort of her own small, familiar home." The genie fulfilled the command instantly and silently. The tailor's old wooden house was magically moved and stood safely in the garden of the new palace. The mother of Aladdin lived there peacefully, surrounded by the incredible wealth of her son, but maintaining her simple, humble way of life, content with her son's happiness. The young man and Princess Badr al-Budur lived in perfect happiness for many months, unaware that the shadow of their enemy was soon to fall upon them. For several months, Aladdin and Princess Badr al-Budur lived in perfect peace and happiness within the walls of their magnificent palace. They were oblivious to the distant shadow of their greatest enemy. Meanwhile, the wicked African magician, who had trapped Aladdin in a cave, had spent weeks using his dark arts and powerful calculations to track the whereabouts of the magic lamp. He was certain that the boy had died in the earth, and yet his magic showed that the lamp was not only still in use, but was located near the very city where he had left the tailor's son to perish. Driven by bitter rage and astonishment, the magician traveled the long distance back to China. He arrived secretly, disguised as a wandering holy man, and crept close to the city gates. The magician was instantly struck by a profound shock. Where there had once been only an empty garden next to the Sultan's humble palace, there now stood a colossal, shining palace of agate and marble, a palace that could only have been built by the immense power of the genie of the lamp. The magician knew immediately what had happened. Aladdin had not died. The boy had somehow accidentally rubbed the lamp while trapped, discovered its incredible secret, and used the genie to become the master of the world. The magician's rage was now cold, concentrated fury, transforming into a cunning desire for revenge. The magician spent several days lurking near the palace walls, quietly questioning the palace servants and the local townspeople. He soon discovered that the master of this new, magnificent palace was indeed Aladdin, the tailor's son, who was now married to the sultan's daughter. Crucially, the magician learned that Aladdin had developed a routine. The young man was a skilled hunter and often left the palace with his retinue for 3 to 4 days at a time to hunt in the distant forests. This routine gave the magician his opportunity. The villain realized that he needed to trick the servants or the princess into giving him the lamp, which they would not understand was anything more than a useless old piece of brass. The magician rushed to the market and purchased a dozen fine, brand new, polished brass lamps. He then returned to the vicinity of the palace and began to perform a simple, vile deception. He disguised himself further as a poor, simple oil lamp merchant. He walked slowly back and forth near the palace, calling out in a loud, monotonous voice, easily heard by the servants within the walls. "New lamps for old. New lamps for old. I will give you a beautiful, brand new brass lamp for any old, dirty lamp you have. New lamps for old." The people of the city laughed at this foolish merchant, who seemed determined to exchange expensive new goods for useless junk. But the magician did not care about the laughter of the people. His voice was only directed at the servants inside Aladdin's palace. Inside the palace, Princess Badr al-Budur was sitting quietly when she heard the strange cry. She thought it was a ridiculous joke. She asked one of her slave women what the strange man was saying. The slave woman explained the merchant's strange offer, a shiny new lamp for a dirty old one. The slave woman suddenly remembered seeing an old, dusty brass lamp sitting forgotten on a shelf in Aladdin's private chamber. This was, of course, the magic lamp. The princess, not knowing its history or its immense power, thought this would be a delightful jest to play on her beloved husband. "He has had that dirty old thing for ages," she said, smiling. "It would be an amusing trick to exchange it for a bright, new one." The princess commanded the slave woman to take the dusty, old lamp to the foolish merchant and make the exchange. The unsuspecting slave woman, following the command of Princess Badr al-Budur, took the dusty old brass lamp from the private chamber. She descended to the street and, laughing at the merchant's foolish offer, handed the true magic lamp to the supposed exchange. The wicked African magician could barely contain his joy. His hands trembled as he snatched the lamp and instantly gave the slave woman a shiny, worthless new lamp in return. The magician did not linger to enjoy his victory. He knew Aladdin was hunting, and he had only a limited time before the master returned. The magician rushed out of the city gates to a remote, deserted spot. He took the old lamp in his hands, kissed it greedily, and slowly, deliberately rubbed its side. The colossal genie of the lamp appeared instantly, filling the open space with the terrifying sound of its voice. "I am here, master. Command me," the genie announced, bowing low to its new owner. The magician's eyes gleamed with triumphant malice. "Genie," he commanded, his voice shaking with long-awaited revenge, "I order you to take the entire palace, the entire structure, the Princess Badr al-Budur, all the treasures, the slave girls, the servants, and every single thing inside it, transport it instantly across the sea. Take it to the farthest reaches of Africa, to a desolate place of my choosing, and make sure that it is positioned so that the Sultan can never see it again." The genie of the lamp had no choice but to obey the true master of the lamp. The colossal spirit instantly gathered the entire magnificent structure, along with the terrified princess and all the servants, and lifted it high into the air. In the blink of an eye, the magical palace, which had taken only one night to build, vanished completely from its foundation, leaving behind only the empty, disturbed earth of the garden where it had stood. The very next morning, the Sultan woke up. He looked out his window with pride, eager to see the magnificent palace of his son-in-law. Instead of the shimmering marble and jeweled walls, his eyes were met with a gaping, empty space. The palace was gone. Not a single stone or beam remained. The Sultan thought the shock of the night before had driven him mad. He shouted for his attendants and ordered them to look. The entire court was thrown into confusion and terror. The colossal palace, his daughter, all the slaves, and all the treasures had vanished without a trace. The Sultan was consumed by a blinding, terrible rage. He now knew without a doubt that Aladdin was not a prince, but a powerful evil sorcerer who had mocked and humiliated the royal family. His rage was so immense that he fell from his throne. He immediately commanded his guards to ride out to the hunting grounds and find Aladdin. "Bring the wicked sorcerer back in chains," the Sultan screamed. "I will have his head for this treachery." Aladdin, riding back from his hunting trip, was still miles from the city when he saw the panic of the royal guards approaching him. He was arrested immediately, put in heavy chains, and dragged back to the city. When he arrived, Aladdin was led by the guards to the spot where his palace had stood. He stared at the empty, barren ground. His horror was absolute. He understood instantly. The magician had somehow returned and stolen the old lamp. He was rushed before the furious Sultan. The old ruler looked at Aladdin with murderous hatred. "Sorcerer," the Sultan roared, "where is my daughter? Where is your palace? You have brought shame to my kingdom. Prepare to die." He stood before the raging Sultan, chained and facing immediate execution. He could only stare at the empty earth where his home had stood. He knew he was innocent, but he lacked the magic lamp to prove it. The young man, remembering the love he shared with the princess, begged the Sultan. He reminded the old ruler of the magnificent dowry, the impossible palace, and his past devotion. He pleaded for one single day of reprieve. "My lord," he cried, "grant me but one day. If I cannot find your daughter and my palace in that time, then I deserve to die." The Sultan, softened by the memory of Aladdin's true kindness and the magnificent gifts, reluctantly agreed to the one-day reprieve. He was released from his chains, but was kept under heavy guard. Alone and desperate, the young man walked outside the city walls. He clasped his hands together in despair, intending to pray. As he rubbed his hands, his fingers accidentally touched the ring that the African magician had once forced upon him. In an instant, the smaller, gentler genie of the ring appeared before him. The genie's presence brought a spark of hope. "I am here, master of the ring. Command me," the spirit announced. He knew the genie of the ring was not powerful enough to move the entire palace, but he could transport his master. "Genie," he commanded, "I wish to be transported instantly to the place where my palace and my wife, Princess Badr-al-Budur, now stand." The ring genie instantly fulfilled the command. In the next moment, he found himself standing in the palace garden, under the hot sun of Africa, hundreds of miles away. He rushed into the palace and found his beloved Princess Badr-al-Budur. The princess, overjoyed and weeping with relief, recounted her terrifying ordeal. She explained how the wicked African magician, now the new master of the lamp, forced her to serve him, trying to win her affection while keeping the lamp hidden in his robes at all times. The princess and her husband quickly devised a plan. They knew they could not defeat the magician with strength, but only with cunning. The young man instructed his wife to pretend to accept the magician's advances and offer him a toast of rare, potent wine that evening. The princess, brave and determined, agreed. The young man then took a small, powerful sleeping powder he carried with him from his hunting trip and gave it to the princess, instructing her to secretly mix it into the magician's wine. That evening, the magician, believing he had finally won the princess's favor, entered her chamber. Princess Badr-al-Budur greeted him with feigned sweetness and offered him a cup of the poisoned wine. The magician, arrogant and triumphant, drank the wine immediately. Within minutes, the powerful powder took effect, and the wicked African magician fell senseless and deeply asleep upon the floor. He rushed from his hiding place. He took the old lamp from the magician's robe and rubbed it with intense relief. The huge genie of the lamp appeared, bowing to its true master. "Genie," he commanded, "take this palace, the princess, and myself, and return us instantly to the exact spot in the Sultan's city where the palace was built. And leave the sleeping magician lying here in this desert." In another instant, the palace stood shimmering and whole, back in the garden next to the Sultan's palace. The magician was left alone in the distant African desert to face his bitter fate. The Sultan, who had been mourning his daughter and preparing for Aladdin's execution, looked out his window at the exact moment the palace reappeared. His joy was overwhelming. He rushed to the palace, embracing his daughter and Aladdin with tears of relief. He explained the entire story of the lamp and the wicked magician. The Sultan, now understanding everything, renewed his wedding vows to Aladdin with the greatest joy and pomp. Aladdin and his beautiful princess Badr-al-Budur lived happily in their magnificent palace, surrounded by unimaginable wealth, thanks to the power of the magic lamp. He eventually became the Sultan of the kingdom, ruling wisely and kindly for many years, securing a peaceful and wonderful ending to the great tale of Aladdin and the wonderful lamp. Asterisk. Now the final chapter of our story has been told. Let the beautiful sounds of the East, the quiet voices, and the gentle magic of Aladdin's legend settle around you. The lamp is safe, the princess is home, and the world is at peace. It is time now to let go of all worry and tension. Allow your mind to become heavy, allow your body to relax completely, and drift away into the deepest, most tranquil sleep. Thank you for listening to this ancient tale. We promise to return very soon with new and calming stories from distant lands, specially prepared to help you find peace and rest. Until then, sleep well and dream of beautiful, glittering palaces. Good night.